Hello friends, James Stevenson here with a video about why we don't still use equine forms of transportation. Why don't we ride horses everywhere we go anymore? We used to. It was normal for many, many centuries for people to ride on horseback or to be pulled by horses in a carriage. That was normal. And usually one man gets credited with a lot of the reason why that old form of transportation was disrupted. I think you'll see where I'm going with this. And that man is Henry Ford, who made combustion engine vehicles so affordable that they disrupted the horse as the way most people get around these days. There still are horses out there. You can still own a horse and you can still ride a horse, but most people don't because it's a lot more expensive to do that than it is to just buy a regular car. Well, people often make comparisons to Tesla and Elon Musk being the person who began the EV revolution that's disrupting the combustion engine vehicle market. And what's interesting is to lay side by side how many Model Ts were produced as they ramped up versus how many vehicles Tesla has been able to produce. That's something that Sam Corris did a while back, but I'm getting ahead of myself because today's episode is also an episode of Breakfast with Loki. So let me get Loki his breakfast. There you go, buddy. And we'll see if Loki comes over and eats his breakfast. Don't worry about this bandage on top of my head. I had a very minor procedure done. If Loki comes over to enjoy his breakfast, we'll move the camera and keep him in the frame so you won't miss a split second of the exciting action here in the Loki cam. But the reason I'm on this topic at all is because Scott Palamas, I'm going to pronounce it that way until I learn it should be pronounced a different way, tagged me saying you could update this chart for everyone. This is how I get some of my chart ideas. People tag me in Twitter threads, and then I get to scroll up and see what's going on here. So back on July 26th, 2021, the aforementioned Sam Corris of ARK Invest tweeted, for everyone looking to compare the Tesla and Ford Model T ramp, pulling data from Tesla website and Wikipedia for Ford. And I'll show you what the comparison is that Sam put together. He starts Ford in 1908 on this chart, and he starts Tesla in 2012. Now, that's not the first way that would have occurred to me to do this, because according to Wikipedia, 1909 was the first year for Ford production. And for Tesla, they had already been producing original Roadsters for 4 years in 2012 when they started producing the Model S that was comparatively a lower priced vehicle. Let me move this camera over so you don't miss out on what Loki is doing over here. Yes, don't get camera shy just because I mentioned your name, buddy. We'll tilt the camera down here a little bit and you can see him enjoying his breakfast. So if you start them that way, 1908 versus 2012, here is how the production ramps compared. Very similar, right? Very similar. So that's what Elon Musk commented on here, saying cars today are far more complex than Model T, with a global supply chain that is vulnerable to force majeure risk. Like Model T, supply chain for battery EVs simply doesn't exist at massive scale, so must be built in parallel. Ideas are easy, production is hard. Anybody can have an idea. Anybody can say, you know what, there ought to be a blank. That's the super easy part. It's so easy, many of us do it all the time. But the hard part is not doing that, and it's not even making the prototype. Elon reminds us often that scaling up production is really the hard part. That's what Scott asked me about. I replied, why am I getting notifications of people liking these 2-year-old tweets today? So my reply, when I saw this reply from Elon, was, Nicola has left the chat. Lucid has left the chat. Lordstown has left the chat. That was 2 years ago. So Lordstown, I think, was the first of these three to file for bankruptcy. Nicola and Lucid are still at it, but they are in a world of hurt nowadays with Peter Rawlinson taking the ribbing he ought to be taking for managing that company. All right, so I have taken up the challenge, and I'll get rid of this Twitter window and show you what I did. Now, I didn't want to just duplicate exactly what Sam had with a couple more columns and call it a day. I thought, what would be the most visually interesting way of doing this comparison? And I did it this way, so I updated a Flourish animated chart. Now, this is not the usual James Stevenson chart here. This shows Tesla trailing the Ford Model T. Loki, did you finish all your breakfast? You did. All right, let me go back to the Loki's bed cam here and move this up a little bit. You're a good boy. You get a treat. Yes, good boy. Positive reinforcement for Loki. Eating all of his food right away. Good boy. Yes, love you. All right, another successful episode of Breakfast with Loki, which is what all of you are really here for. I'm just vamping for time over here, while you all enjoy seeing Loki go about his business as he returns victorious to the Loki spot, Pillow Arena, his big stuffed dog bed with blue blankies. Okay, so if you've seen most of my charts, you know that most of them don't look like this, with Tesla losing. But let me animate this for you and show where I started both these companies was in 1909, so I gave Ford an extra year head start versus where Sam started them, and I backed Tesla up, so I'm burdening Tesla with the 4 years that they were only making the original Roadster, and they only made like 2,200 of those total, right? So this chart is showing cumulative production by year beginning in Q1 of 09, and instead of doing it by year, I'm doing it by quarter. I'll show you how I did that in just a second. So here's what this looks like. It took Tesla several years to make 3,000 cars. And then they were making only Model S, and then they added Model X, and then they added Model 3, and then they added Model Y. And you can see the trend here, right? So I may yet tweet out this chart. When I saw how it turned out, I wasn't very happy with it. Let me play it for you one more time. So yeah, very low production. It looks like Tesla's cumulative production is going backwards, but it's only going backwards relative to how quickly the Ford Model T was scaling. But yeah, they never leave first place. The Model T just stays that full bar as the numbers fly past it. So over the first 14 years that Ford was producing Model Ts, they made over 6 million. And over the first 14 years Tesla was making automobiles, they made over 4.6 million, updated through the cumulative production from Q2 of 2023. This number is probably a useless number. This is combining this number and that number. I don't know what good it is to know what the combined number is. I may just get rid of this in the settings, actually. But I'll show you how I got to this. So I already had quarterly revenue for Tesla and quarterly deliveries and quarterly production, and I already have those as cumulative. And I've got a couple of blank rows here I can update for Q3 and Q4. I should have organized these the opposite direction, but I didn't because the data that I had in the first place went the other way. So I regret that. But I did drop in the Model T data from the Wikipedia websites. This is, you know, kind of letting you in on how the sausage is made. And I said I did it by quarter. I spread it myself by quarter with approximations, estimates of how this worked. Then there's a note here that in 1927, the final year Ford made Model T, production ended before mid-year to allow retooling for the Model A. So I had to spread these accordingly so that there wouldn't be any production in Q3 and Q4 after Ford had stopped making Model T. And then I had to translate these into years, so I've labeled them for the Ford Model T years beginning in 1909, but then for Tesla, when I lay these numbers in here, these are 2009, so exactly 100 years later, Tesla began its climb upwards. And you can see these numbers, these cumulatives here. I have to leave them general format so that Flourish will play friendly with them if you put the commas in. Sometimes it errors out the Flourish charts. And I've got my labels here for the years, and just run this out. So this is a little bit of how the sausage is made. I'll run you back to this again, and I'll say next steps for me probably are to just update the chart that Sam had for the couple of years we've had, 2021 and 2022, since he sent that chart out, and see how it looks. But I may keep this animated chart in my back pocket for future years when Tesla will surpass the Model T production. And with that, I will check back in with Loki and see that he is up and alert. And I'll outro and say, if you've enjoyed today's video, click the like button. If you're not subscribed to my channel already, why not go ahead and subscribe to my channel over here for free if you're watching this on YouTube. Click the notification bell to be alerted whenever I post fresh content. Thank you to everyone who supports me on Patreon or on X or right here on YouTube, if that's where you're watching me, by joining my YouTube channel as my executive producers Kathy Kitchler and Rebellionaire.com did, and I'll see you in the next one.